the Shrouded Town. In the heart of a forgotten coastal town, where the sea kissed the shore with a whisper and the air was thick with the scent of salt and decay, a chilling atmosphere hung over the cobbled streets. The town, known only to the most intrepid of travelers as Arkham, was a place where the veil between the mundane and the cosmic grew thin, and the shadows danced with secrets long buried. Fog rolled in from the ocean, curling around the gnarled trees and the crumbling buildings that stood like ancient sentinels, their once proud facades now weathered by time and the relentless march of entropy. The sun, when it dared to peek through the thick clouds, cast long, distorted shadows that seemed to reach out, beckoning the unwary into the depths of the unknown. At the center of this desolate town stood the Miskatonic University, a place where the pursuit of knowledge often led to madness. Its Gothic architecture loomed over the streets, a stark reminder of the horrors that lay within its walls. The university was a sanctuary for those who sought to unravel the mysteries of the universe, but it was also a prison for the secrets that lay dormant in the dusty tomes of its library. Here, the whispers of the Necronomicon echoed through the halls, a testament to the dark truths that had been unearthed by those who dared to delve into the abyss. The townspeople, once vibrant and full of life, now moved with a sense of dread, their eyes darting to the shadows that clung to the corners of their homes. They spoke in hushed tones of the old ones, of the things that lurked beneath the waves, waiting for the moment when the veil would thin enough for them to rise again. The very air seemed to pulse with an ancient rhythm, a reminder of the cosmic horror that had long been waiting in the wings, ready to unleash its terror upon the unsuspecting. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting an eerie glow over the town, the atmosphere thickened with a sense of foreboding. It was a place where the past and the present collided, where the echoes of the old ones lingered like a ghost, whispering promises of power and madness. In this shrouded town, where the line between reality and the unknown blurred, the stage was set for a descent into the depths of cosmic horror, and the first threads of a tale woven from fear and obsession began to take shape. The Scholar's Descent. Thomas Varnell had once been a man of reason, a professor of comparative literature at Miskatonic University, known for his meticulous research and unshakable belief in the power of knowledge. But as the years passed, his obsession with the occult deepened, and the boundaries of his rational mind began to fray. He had always been drawn to the forbidden, to the texts that whispered of things beyond human comprehension. The Necronomicon, the relié texts, the fragmented accounts of the old ones, these were not mere curiosities to him. They were the key to unlocking the great mysteries of the universe, a path to enlightenment that others had failed to comprehend. His descent began with a single, unassuming volume he had acquired from a private collection in Arkham. The book, bound in cracked leather, and inscribed with symbols that seemed to shift when viewed from different angles, bore the title De Profundis, a name that had long been lost to history. The first time he opened it, he had been struck by a strange sense of familiarity, as though the text had been written not in ink, but in something far older, something that had been waiting for him to find it. He had spent weeks poring over its pages, deciphering the archaic script, and with each passage his fascination grew. But knowledge came at a cost. The more he read, the more he felt the weight of unseen eyes upon him, as if the very fabric of reality was shifting around him. He began to dream of things that should not exist, of towering monoliths rising from the depths of the ocean, of beings with too many eyes and too many limbs, whispering in a language that bypassed thought itself. He would wake in a cold sweat, the words of the book echoing in his mind, their meaning just beyond his grasp. His colleagues at the university began to notice the change in him. He grew more reclusive, spending long hours in the library, his once pristine office now littered with pages of frantic notes and half-finished translations. He no longer attended lectures, nor did he participate in the university's academic discussions. He had become something else, something that no longer fit within the world of men. And then came the first signs of madness. He would speak to himself in the corridors, muttering fragments of the texts he had studied, his voice trembling with an urgency he could not explain. He began to see things in the corners of his vision, shadows that moved when they should not, shapes that flickered at the edges of his perception. The university's faculty, once his peers, now regarded him with a mixture of concern and fear. They did not know what had taken hold of him, but they knew that something had. Thomas Varnell was no longer a man of reason. He was a man on the precipice of something far greater, something that would consume him whole. The catalyst of despair. It was on a night when the sky was a tapestry of swirling clouds and the moon had vanished behind a shroud of darkness, that Thomas Varnell found himself drawn to the cliffs that overlooked the restless sea. The wind howled like a banshee, tugging at his clothes and whispering secrets that he could not decipher. He had come here not for the view, but for the promise of revelation. a promise that had been tantalizingly close yet maddeningly elusive. The air was thick with the scent of salt and decay, and the waves crashed against the rocks with a ferocity that mirrored the turmoil within him. As he stood on the precipice, the horizon was a blur of indistinct shapes, and the sea seemed to pulse with a life of its own, as if it were alive and aware of his presence. It was here, amidst the chaos of the night, that he felt the first tremors of the unknown. A strange figure emerged from the shadows, cloaked in a tattered robe that seemed to shift and shimmer like the very fabric of reality itself. The figure was not human, and yet, crashing waves and the lingering echo of its words, Thomas was left standing there, heart racing, a mixture of dread and curiosity swirling within him. He knew he could not turn back now. The path had been set, and the shadows had begun to beckon him toward the abyss. As he returned to the university, his mind was a tempest of thoughts, each one more chaotic than the last. The figure's words haunted him, and he could not shake the feeling that he had been chosen for something greater, something that would unravel the very fabric of his existence. The air felt heavier, as if the universe itself were holding its breath, waiting for him to take the next step. In the days that followed, Thomas found himself drawn to the library where the ancient texts lay in. Wait, their pages whispering promises of power and enlightenment. He could feel the pull of the unknown, a magnetic force that was both intoxicating and terrifying. The inciting incident had set him on a path that would lead him deeper into the mysteries of the cosmos, where the line between sanity and madness would blur beyond recognition. The journey had begun, and with it the descent into the depths of cosmic horror. The Ancient Text and the Outer Gods. Thomas Varnell's fingers trembled as he unrolled the brittle parchment, its surface etched with symbols that seemed to shift and writhe as though alive. The text was unlike anything he had ever encountered. Its language was archaic, its script a fusion of glyphs that bore no resemblance to any known human writing. Yet as he traced the lines with his eyes, a strange familiarity settled over him, as if the words had been waiting for him to read them. The passage spoke of the outer gods, beings of unfathomable power that had existed before time itself, before the cosmos had taken shape. They were not gods in the conventional sense. They were not deities to be worshipped or feared in the way that lesser beings had been. They were something else entirely, entities that defied comprehension, whose very existence was an affront to the laws of reality. The text described them as entities of pure chaos, beings whose forms were ever-changing, whose presence was felt not through sight or sound, but through the very fabric of existence itself. One of these entities, known as Azathoth, was described as the blind idiot god, a mindless, formless mass of writhing flesh, and uncountable eyes that stared into the void without understanding. It was said to dwell in the heart of the void beyond the stars, a place where time did not flow, and where reality itself was a fleeting illusion. Another, Nyarlathotep, was depicted as a being of countless forms, a shifting, ever-changing entity that could take on any shape, any face, any voice. It was a god of lies and deception, a whisperer of secrets that should never be known. And then there was Shub-Niggurath, the mother of monsters, a being of infinite fertility and insatiable hunger, whose presence was said to bring forth the most terrible of horrors. As Thomas read, he felt a deepening sense of unease, as though the very act of reading these words was a violation of something sacred. The text warned of the dangers of seeking knowledge beyond the limits of human understanding, of the madness that would inevitably follow those who dared to look into the abyss. It spoke of the madness that had befallen those who had come before him, of scholars who had delved too deeply into the secrets of the outer gods and had been consumed by their own discoveries. His mind reeled as he tried to make sense of the implications. If these beings had truly existed, if they had once walked the earth, then what had become of them? Had they been banished to the void, or had they merely retreated into the shadows, waiting for the moment when the veil between worlds would thin once more? And if they had been banished, what force had been strong enough to drive them away? Thomas's thoughts were interrupted by a sudden, violent tremor that shook the very foundations of the library. The shelves groaned as books tumbled from their places, and the air grew thick with an oppressive weight, as though the very walls were closing in around him. He staggered back, his breath coming in ragged gasps, the words of the text still echoing in his mind. He had read of the outer gods, but now, for the first time, he felt their presence. It was not a presence that could be seen or heard, but one that pressed upon him like a weight upon his soul. The knowledge he had sought was no longer just an academic pursuit. There was something far greater, something that had already begun to take hold of him. And as he stood there, trembling in the dim light of the library, he realized that he had no choice but to continue. The path had been set, and the abyss was waiting. The descent into madness. Thomas Varnell found himself trapped in a labyrinth of his own making, where the lines between reality and madness blurred with each passing day. The texts he had once revered now whispered to him in a language that was not his own, their words slithering into his mind like serpents, coiling around his thoughts and twisting them into something grotesque. He could no longer distinguish the voices of the scholars who had come before him from the echoes of the outer gods themselves, each one a chorus of madness that pulled him deeper into the abyss. He spent sleepless nights poring over the ancient tomes, his candle burning low as he traced the symbols with trembling fingers, his mind alight with the intoxicating promise of forbidden knowledge. The more he read, the more he felt the weight of the cosmos pressing upon him, a presence that was both alluring and terrifying. He began to see visions that danced at the edges of his perception, shadows that moved with a will of their own, shapes that flickered in and out of existence like mirages in a desert of madness. In the days that followed, Thomas's physical form began to reflect the turmoil within. His once pristine hair grew unkempt, a wild tangle of dark strands that fell across his face, framing a gaunt visage that bore the marks of sleepless nights and relentless obsession. His eyes, once bright with the spark of intellectual curiosity, now held a haunted glimmer as if they had glimpsed something that should never have been seen. He was no longer the man who had once walked the halls of Miskatonic University with confidence and purpose. He had become a specter, a shadow of his former self, consumed by the very knowledge he had sought. Each day the madness deepened, and with it came a compulsion that he could not resist. He would find himself wandering the corridors of the university, speaking in fragmented sentences to the empty air, his voice trembling with the weight of the knowledge he had uncovered. He would often stop in the middle of the hallway, his back to the door, and whisper to the walls, as if they were the only ones who could understand him. "They are watching," he would murmur, "waiting for me to unlock the door." The words echoed in the silence, a haunting refrain that only he could hear. The university's faculty, once his colleagues, now regarded him with a mixture of fear and pity. They had seen the change in him, the way he had become a prisoner to his own mind. They spoke of him in hushed tones, their voices laced with concern, as if they were afraid that the madness would spread to them as well. "He's not the same," they would say, their eyes darting to the shadows that seemed to follow him wherever he went. "He's lost to the abyss." But Thomas was not lost. He was consumed, and the more he delved into the texts, the more he felt the pull of the unknown. The entity that had first appeared to him on the cliffs now haunted his dreams, its voice a cacophony of whispers that echoed in his mind, promising him power and enlightenment. "You must continue," it would say, "for the knowledge you seek is the key to unlocking the secrets of the universe." With each passing day, the madness grew stronger, a relentless tide that pulled him further into the depths of the unknown. He was no longer a scholar. He was a vessel for the knowledge that had been waiting for him, a conduit through which the ancient truths of the cosmos would flow. And as he stood on the precipice of madness, he could feel the abyss calling to him, its voice a siren song that he could not resist. Me. The first encounter. The air in the hidden chamber was thick with a palpable tension, as if the very fabric of reality had been stretched taut, waiting for the moment of revelation. Thomas Varnell stood at the threshold, his heart racing with a mix of fear and anticipation. The flickering candlelight cast long shadows on the stone walls, illuminating the ancient symbols that adorned the chamber, their meaning elusive and haunting. He could feel the weight of the unknown pressing down on him, an oppressive force that seemed to emanate from the very walls themselves. As he stepped deeper into the chamber, a low, guttural sound reverberated through the air, sending shivers down his spine. It was not the sound of the wind or the crackling of the candle. It was something else entirely, a whisper that seemed to come from the very depths of the universe. The entity was here, and it was watching him. Suddenly, the shadows shifted, coalescing into a shape that was both familiar and utterly alien. The entity emerged from the darkness, a grotesque amalgamation of limbs and eyes, its form a swirling mass of flesh and shadow that defied comprehension. It was not a being of flesh, but something far more terrifying, a creature of pure chaos, its presence a manifestation of the horrors that lurked beyond the veil of reality. Thomas's breath caught in his throat as he stared into the entity's eyes, which were not eyes in the conventional sense, but rather voids that seemed to pull him into an abyss of madness. The entity's voice, a cacophony of whispers and echoes, filled the chamber, resonating in his mind like a siren song that beckoned him closer. "You have come seeking knowledge," it intoned, its voice a blend of countless voices, each one a fragment of the madness that had consumed him. "But knowledge is a double-edged sword, and the price of understanding is steep." With each word, the entity's form shifted, its limbs elongating and contorting in ways that defied the laws of nature. It was as if the very fabric of reality was being pulled apart by its presence, and Thomas could feel the weight of the cosmos pressing against him, a reminder of the insignificance of his existence in the face of such overwhelming power. He took a step back, his heart pounding in his chest, but the entity's gaze held him captive, an unyielding force that would not allow him to escape. "You are not ready," it whispered, its voice a soft caress that sent a chill through him. "You must learn to embrace the madness that lies within you, for it is the only path to true understanding." Thomas's mind raced, the words of the ancient texts echoing in his thoughts. He had read of the outer gods, of the horrors that had consumed those who had come before him, but now, standing before this entity, he felt the weight of those warnings pressing upon him like a physical force. The knowledge he had sought was no longer just a pursuit, it was a curse, a burden that would consume him whole. The entity moved closer, its form shifting and morphing, as if it were a living tapestry of shadows and light. It was beautiful in its grotesqueness, a creature that embodied the very essence of cosmic horror. Thomas could feel the pull of its presence, a compulsion that urged him to surrender to the madness that had taken hold of him. But even as the entity loomed before him, a part of him resisted, a flicker of defiance that refused to be extinguished. He had come seeking knowledge, and he would not be deterred by the horrors that lay before him. The entity's voice was a siren song, but he would not be its victim. He would face the abyss, no matter the cost. The confrontation. Thomas Varnell stood frozen, his breath shallow, his mind a tempest of conflicting emotions. The entity loomed before him, its shifting form a grotesque parody of life, a being that was neither wholly flesh nor entirely void. It was the embodiment of everything he had sought and everything he had feared, a creature that had been waiting for him in the depths of the unknown. And now it was here, pressing upon him with the weight of the cosmos itself. He took a step forward, his voice trembling as he spoke, though he did not know whether he was addressing the entity or himself. "You are not real," he whispered, though the words felt hollow, as if they had no power to dispel the darkness that surrounded him. "You are a construct of my mind, a manifestation of my obsession. I have read too much, seen too much, and now I am paying the price." The entity did not move, but its presence seemed to intensify, as though it were listening, waiting for him to speak again. "You are wrong," it intoned, its voice a chorus of countless whispers, each one a fragment of the madness that had consumed him. "You are not paying the price. You are merely beginning to understand." Thomas clenched his fists, his nails digging into his palms. He had spent years chasing the knowledge that had been hidden from the world, had sacrificed everything for the pursuit of truth. And now, standing before the entity, he felt the weight of his choices pressing down upon him. He had not merely sought knowledge, he had invited the madness, had allowed it to take root in his mind. And now it was here, demanding to be acknowledged. He took another step forward, his voice steadier now. "I will not be your vessel," he said, his words filled with a determination he had not felt in years. "I will not become like those before me, those who have been consumed by the unknown. I will not let the abyss claim me." The entity tilted its head, as if amused. "You are brave," it said, its voice a low, guttural rumble. "But bravery is not enough. You must choose. Will you remain a man, clinging to the fragile illusion of your existence, or will you embrace the truth and become something more?" Thomas's heart pounded in his chest. The choice was before him, a choice that had been waiting for him since the moment he had first opened the ancient texts. He had always known that knowledge came at a cost, that the pursuit of the unknown was a path that few could walk. And now, standing before the entity, he realized that he had no choice but to walk it. He closed his eyes, his mind a storm of thoughts, of memories, of the lives he had left behind. He had spent years searching for the truth, had sacrificed his sanity, his relationships, his very sense of self. And now he stood on the precipice of something greater, something that could not be undone. He opened his eyes, and for the first time he did not fear the entity. "I will not be your vessel," he said, his voice steady, resolute. "But I will not turn away either. I will face the abyss, no matter the cost." The entity's form shuddered, as though it had been waiting for this moment. And then, without warning, it moved. The air around Thomas grew heavy, thick with an unseen force that pressed against him, a presence that was not of this world. He felt the entity's power surging through him, a force that was both terrifying and intoxicating. It was as if the very fabric of reality was unraveling, as if the cosmos itself was reaching out to him, offering him a choice that no man had ever made before. And in that moment, Thomas Varnell knew that the abyss was not just waiting for him. It was claiming him. The abyss. Unleashed, Thomas Varnell stood at the precipice, the entity's presence pressing upon him like a tide that would not relent. The air was thick with the scent of something ancient, something that had long been buried beneath the weight of time and secrecy. The chamber around him pulsed with an energy that was neither light nor dark, but something in between, a force that defied the very laws of existence. He could feel the entity's power coiling around him, a force that sought to consume him whole, to pull him into the depths of the unknown. He took a step forward, his voice steady despite the tremor in his chest. "I will not be your vessel," he said again, his words a defiance that echoed in the chamber. "But I will not turn away either. I will face the abyss, no matter the cost." The entity did not move, but the air around it seemed to ripple, as if the very fabric of reality was being pulled apart by its presence. A low, guttural sound filled the chamber, a sound that was neither voice nor whisper, but something else entirely, a resonance that vibrated in the bones of the world itself. Then the entity spoke again. "You have chosen," it intoned, its voice a cacophony of countless voices, each one a fragment of the madness that had consumed him. "And now you will see." With a sudden, violent motion, the entity reached out, its form shifting and twisting in ways that defied comprehension. The chamber trembled as the entity's presence expanded, its form no longer confined to the space before him, but stretching outward, as if it were a force that could not be contained. The shadows that had once clung to the edges of the room now surged forward, coalescing into a mass of writhing darkness that pulsed with an unnatural rhythm. Thomas felt the weight of the entity's presence pressing upon him, a force that was not merely physical, but something far more insidious. It was as if the very essence of the cosmos was being pulled into him, as if the knowledge he had sought for so long was now being forced upon him, no longer a choice, but a compulsion. His mind reeled as the entity's presence flooded his thoughts, a torrent of visions and sensations that were not his own. He saw the world as it had been before time, before the stars had been born, before the first breath of life had been taken. He saw the outer gods, not as beings of flesh, but as forces of pure chaos, entities that had existed before the universe had taken shape. He saw the moment when the veil had first been drawn, when the knowledge of the cosmos had been hidden from the world, when the first scholars had sought to unlock the secrets of the abyss. And then he saw himself. He saw the man he had been, the man he had become, and the man he would be. He saw the path that had been laid before him, the descent into madness that had been inevitable from the moment he had first opened the ancient texts. He saw the knowledge that had consumed him, the power that had been waiting for him all along. The entity's voice was no longer a whisper, but a roar that filled the chamber, a sound that resonated in the very core of his being. "You have come seeking knowledge," it said, its voice a storm of voices. "And now you will be the knowledge." Thomas Varnell did not scream. He did not resist. He did not fight. He simply stood there, as the entity's presence consumed him, as the abyss claimed him whole, and in that moment the world was no longer his. It was no longer anything. The entity's form shimmered, its presence expanding until it filled the entire chamber, until it was no longer a being, but something far greater, something that had always been waiting, watching, waiting for the moment when the veil would thin enough for it to rise again. And as the last of Thomas Varnell's mind was consumed by the entity, the abyss was no longer waiting. It had finally come. The lingering horror. The town of Arkham remained unchanged on the surface, its cobbled streets still lined with the same crumbling buildings and the same fog that curled around the edges of the world like a forgotten memory. But beneath the surface, something had shifted. The knowledge that had consumed Thomas Varnell had not been lost with him. It had taken root, spreading like a disease through the very fabric of the town. The whispers of the ancient texts still echoed in the minds of those who had once dismissed them as mere superstition. The shadows that had once clung to the corners of the town now moved with a will of their own, their presence no longer confined to the edges of perception, but pressing upon the people who lived there. The university, once a beacon of scholarly pursuit, had become a place of fear and secrecy. The faculty, those who had once regarded Varnell with a mixture of pity and concern, now spoke in hushed tones, their eyes darting to the empty office where he had once worked. Some claimed that they had seen strange lights flickering in the halls, that the books in the library had rearranged themselves in the dead of night. Others whispered of the professor's final days, of the madness that had consumed him, of the knowledge he had sought and the price he had paid. But it was not only the university that had changed. The townspeople, who had once lived their lives in quiet obscurity, now found themselves haunted by visions that had never before touched them. They saw things in the corners of their vision, shadows that moved when they should not, figures that stood at the edge of the world watching. They heard voices that did not belong to them, whispers that spoke in a language they could not understand, but somehow knew. Some had gone mad, their minds unraveling in the same way that Varnell's had. Others had simply disappeared, vanishing into the night with no trace of where they had gone. And then there were those who had not gone mad, but who had changed. They no longer spoke of the old ones as a distant myth, but as a reality that had been waiting for them, waiting for the moment when the veil would thin again. They sought knowledge in the same way that Varnell had, not with the hope of enlightenment, but with the certainty that it was the only path forward. And so the cycle continued, a never-ending descent into the abyss, a path that had been taken once before and would be taken again. In the end, the entity had not been vanished. It had not been defeated. It had simply waited, watching, waiting for the next man to take the same path that Varnell had, to seek the knowledge that had been hidden for so long. And as the sun set over Arkham, casting its long, distorted shadows across the town, the entity's presence remained, a whisper in the wind, a presence in the darkness, waiting for the next soul to be claimed. Do not forget to hit the like button and subscribe for more stories. Hit the notification bell to be notified of new stories when they become available. Feel free to leave a comment and tell me if you enjoyed the story and want to hear more like it.